Problems with your Pyle speaker's volume knob. Let's say you go to plug this in. It keeps cutting out. You know that you need new volume knobs. Now, first things first, and learn from my mistake. Do not have this plugged in. Even if you have the switch off, do not have it plugged in when you're working on it, because you will burn up the insides. Okay, so there are, on this speaker, 10 screws, all on the outside perimeter. Before you take out all your screws, you'll want to remove your knobs. You'll want to remove all these knobs here, because sometimes they can be very difficult to get off. These are what goes bad. You have the A10K. These are the two types that most you will end up having to get. So, after you take your screws out, you need to replace your volume knobs, which this here is your volume knob for your line in, and this here is your master volume. So these two here are the culprit. I'm going to replace both of them. Now, the way to test these is I do a continuity test. I'll get a new one here. You put one lead on the middle and then one on the outside, and you turn it. You can see that the continuity goes down to 0. It'll start beeping. Then if you turn it back up, it'll go all the way back up. You can test it on the opposite side, and it'll go the other way. So, a bad one, I'll try to get this one out. All right, so this is, let me see, this is the bad one here. And I just put one lead on there in the center, and then just one on the outside edge. And you'll see that the ohm meter cuts out a lot. And I'm turning the knob right now. Right now it should be at full volume. So a bad one, you can kind of wiggle it around and you might get a little bit of sound out of it. But that's how you know they're bad. They start to separate. I've tried squeezing them back together. Sometimes it works, sometimes it does not. So we'll end up replacing that. Tools you need. You can use a needle nose to take off these here. They're 10 millimeters. I like to use the 10 millimeter deep well. And the needle nose you will use to take off where the 3.5 millimeter headphone jack is. And just take that, loosen it up. Careful, don't lose those. And then they really like to use their hot glue. So like on this one here, the red and green light, I kind of pushed on them from the outside and then removed. Also, tools. I got this little solder sucker. Basically get the solder real hot and you push that and it sucks the solder up in there. When this doesn't work, you use the desoldering wick. You get all this stuff on Amazon, or you can get it probably, well, like this one says Radio Shack. This is solder. This is the solder that I use. You need flux or soldering paste. Obviously, you'll need your repairs, and then Phillips screwdriver for the screws, or I just use my drill. And one thing that I haven't shown you on here, rubbing alcohol Q-tips, so that after you're done using the flux, you can wipe it all off. Now, one thing about these speakers is they make them as cheap as they can. So the solder that is on there, for some reason, when I use my soldering gun, it does not, sometimes doesn't want to come off with the solder wick, or even with the old called a booger sucker. But what I end up doing is I will end up getting my solder gun, and I'll get my solder and I'll put some of this silver solder on it and then remove it, because for whatever reason it mixes in and it's a little bit easier to get off of there. Okay, but all right, so you want to be as careful as you can with all this. We're going for the volume knob on this one, so just basically get that hot enough. Sorry if I got the coffee shakes. Just like that. Sometimes you got to walk them out. And then we'll want to clean it up real nice. Because right now those 3 holes are not open. Now what we'll do is we'll get some flux and we'll put that on there, all cleaned up. So after the flux, I will grab a solder wick. I'm gonna try and get all that old solder off because it's junk, it's garbage. Okay, so here's the rubbing alcohol. Just take the rubbing alcohol and just clean that flux off there real good. Okay, so once that's all cleaned up, you just grab your new one. Oh, I forgot to tell you about this. So on the new one here, they have this little tab on there. And I just, because the old ones don't have it, they're just aluminum. It breaks off pretty easy. You want to remove that. And then you just take these 3 and you put it in the same way it came out. Slide it right back in there and solder away. So you get a little bit of solder on there. And then I take it out, get it hot. And I push it in there, make sure it's nice and snug up against. Then I'll move on to the next one. this one's all done. I'll just take and put one of these washers on, put one of the nuts on here, and just to hold it into place. Okay. Alright. All the way down. See how it doesn't cut on anymore? That's all it is. And that's that.